if you ever wanted a step-by-step plan to simply follow to get literally anything you want, you're in luck, because that's what I'm talking about today. You're listening to the Science and Spirit of Happy podcast, where we discuss the rational, strategic, and psychological methods, but also the deep reasons and spiritual philosophy behind being happy down to the soul. Happiness isn't just hedonism. It's not even solely personal. Getting happy dramatically increases your effectiveness in every area, from business and finance to relationships. When we align with our own personal version of ideal, we end up not just happier, but healthier, more whole, more successful and richer, but even loving and loved. It's my opinion that getting happy for yourself is the absolute best way to serve the people in your life. I'm your host, Laura Lee Bowers, master healer and academic researcher, and this is another episode diving into the science and spirit of happy, a logical path to soul. G'day, y'all. Welcome back. It's Casual Friday here at the Science and Spirit of Happy podcast. Not because it's Friday, but because we're at the end of season 1. Can you believe it? I can't. I'm so excited. So to cap off season 1, the Friday of season 1, we're going to casually kind of go through all the points that I covered this season. Not only are we going to go through all the points that I've covered this season and what I'm calling the kind of the step-by-step logical plan to go from zero to hero. We're also going to talk about how these steps have affected me in my life. So my outcome, if you've been following along, you know that when I started this podcast, or maybe not the day that I started this podcast, but where I started this podcast from was a place of extreme struggle. And if you have also listened to the first episode, you'll know that I was raised, like my childhood and adolescence, I came from a place of real struggle, of kind of extreme struggle, of mental illness even. And I like to separate mental health issues and mental illness in my kind of understanding, the way that I talk about things. Whereas mental illness, you don't have control over. And mental health issues are, issues with your mental wellness. Well, I had mental illness, and so did my parents. And if you watch that first episode, you will know how this approach, what I call the sustainable dreams theory, this method of creating happiness in your life, of going from zero to hero, of going from struggle to ease, of going from, mental illness, mental health issues to happiness, to fulfillment, to self-actualization. You'll know how that turned out for me, and you'll know why I ended up not back in struggle, but in struggle again, because at this stage of my life, I've entered the interdependent stage. I've also talked about independent versus interdependent stage. So your independent stage is typically, in like young adulthood. It's not age specific, but in young adulthood, it's developmentally appropriate to be absorbed in your own kind of journey. And then at the next stage, you enter interdependence, where people are depending on you and you're depending on other people. And it really is a completely different environment that requires a completely different approach, a completely different level of wellness, a completely different type of health and well-being to really thrive in. So myself entering my interdependent stage, I again entered struggle, even though it wasn't the same struggle. It was a leveled up struggle, which also leads me to this idea of zero to hero, this idea, the first step that we're going to talk about has to do with like a feeling of stuckness. And I've talked at length about how stuckness is synonymous with depression, or depression is synonymous with stuckness. But you don't have to be like, the idea of, depression, quote unquote, for this approach, you don't necessarily need to be suffering from clinical depression. You don't need to be, not wanting to get out of bed or be here anymore, or, not enjoying anything or able to clean your house. That's completely, you don't necessarily need to be at maybe what somebody else would consider zero for you to really, really benefit from this. Your zero could be you just keep trying to, get a relationship to work that isn't, or you keep, you want to, even like start a business or start a career, and you're really just having really, really hard struggles, making progress in those areas. Like, your zero can be anything, just anywhere where you feel stuck, anywhere that you feel like it's getting really difficult to move things, or maybe you haven't even tried yet. And that's your zero, that you haven't even begun and you don't know where. When we're talking about zero to hero, we're talking about like your personal zero. That could be one area in your life, one project of your life, or it could be your whole life. It could be, feeling just absolutely, totally like the big stuck. And all of these steps that I'm going to discuss will help anybody at any place of stuckness. So we're going to talk about those steps. I'm going to go through them linearly, one by one. And then I'm also going to talk about my outcomes. So how these steps have affected and impacted my life, how things have changed, if things have changed at all. I'll talk about that at the end of this episode. But throughout this episode, I'm also going to talk about something that I have been teasing unintentionally. I didn't mean to tease it. It's just that there's a principle of my theory. There's a principle. It's not just my theory. There's a principle of life. Okay. There's a principle of alignment, of easeful happiness, of easeful fulfillment, of a natural progression of self-actualization that is found in modern psychology. It is found in ancient spiritual, texts and healing. It's found in any kind of studies on high performance. It's essentially everywhere. And when I say things like getting your whole life aligned with your goals, getting your whole life aligned with the real you, tapping into, your deepest desires, your purpose. We'll talk about all of these things in this episode. But when I talk about tapping into, like the best version of you, your highest self, your purpose, your inspiration, and living in accordance with that on all layers, you absolutely recognize this as the state of, not just fulfillment, feeling fulfilled, because you absolutely do feel totally fulfilled when you're in that state. I'm watching a hummingbird just go bananas outside my window right now. I'm pretty sure that's a sign. But it's not just the state. This is also the way that you get to anything that you want to get to, right? You're having a challenging relationship, or no relationship at all. You're trying to create a relationship. You're having, exceptionally difficult hurdles in your career, etc. This is exactly how you approach these things and achieve the success that you want in any of these areas. Absolutely. So it's not just a state, it's also a method. It's also a practice, what I like to call a practice, and I call it root love. So you will have heard me mention it at least a couple times, if not a few times before, if you've listened to the whole first season. So root love is, I don't want to say it's the bedrock to the sustainable dreams theory, but it really is how we're going to go about creating the life of our dreams, creating anything that we want, creating the relationship of our dreams, creating the financial freedom of our dreams, being, the parent that we desperately wanted to be, the friend, having the community, having the belonging, all of these things. Rootlev is the how. So in the very first episode, this wasn't a step. There's 8 stages of getting unstuck, the 8 steps to go from 0 to hero. This wasn't one of the steps or the stages, but I talked about 6 happiness habits that aren't anything new to anybody. I don't think any of them would surprise anybody, which is a little bit illuminating, I think, because I talked about in that episode how everybody knows what happy people do, or everybody knows what they need to do to get happy. But all people who are stuck in any of those scenarios that I was talking about, all stuck people can't. They literally just cannot. And if you have any kind of pushback against that, to me right now, that you're saying well, that's not true. I absolutely can do these things. I'm just, won't or haven't been, etc. I mean, really, that your happiness is riding on this. If you could just, get up and do the basic things, wouldn't you? Of course you would, right? These happiness habits, or the happiness, the unhappiness habits that people are doing that are not creating, the life that they want. They're just correlations. They're correlated to a problem. They're not the cause of the problem. So they're not causing the unhappiness, just as the 6 happiness habits aren't causing the happiness. It's just a correlation. They're correlated with happiness. So not doing them is also symptomatic that there's a problem. It's not the problem in and of itself. So we're culturally not addressing this at all. We are culturally, doing these happiness statistics and gathering this data and then saying you need to have meaningful relationships and that's how you're going to get happy. And, people who have meaningful relationships, they don't understand how the heck someone would have toxic relationships. And someone who's experiencing toxic relationships, they don't know why or, how to get out of this scenario and get into meaningful, healthful relationships. So the real issue that I was talking about is what I call micro trauma. Well, what I call micro trauma is really the real issue. This is causal. The micro trauma is the cause of the unhappiness, and the habits that are creating scenarios that do not result in happiness are symptoms of microtrauma. So the only requirement I also talked about in this episode, the only requirement to get into the life of your dreams is willingness. After you find this information, at least. I mean, I feel like in the Zen sort of Buddhist frame of viewing the world, I feel like maybe if you had enough willingness, you would just burst through. You would burst through into, what the Zen Buddhists would call enlightenment, what I call Rootlev. You would burst through, you would tap into it, and you would roll with it. That's probably what's happening to, the 5% of people that actually make real change in their life. So for the rest of us that need to take, the traditional step-by-step approach and actually work on this stuff and change our trajectories, inch by inch, I'm going to now go through the 8 steps to go from 0 to the hero. So radical responsibility. Radical responsibility is what we talked about in the Unstuck episode. That is episode 2. I explained how it's never about what's happening, right? So like nothing is ever about what's happening. It's always about how you respond. So I talked about in later episodes of like radical self-acceptance, etc., and how it doesn't really matter what you do. It's what you do about what you do. So it doesn't matter that you messed up a bunch. It doesn't matter that you did all these, unhappiness habits, that you contributed to situations that did not make you happy. That doesn't matter at all. It's never about what's happening. It doesn't matter, that somebody came at you and did something crook. It is always about what you do about it after, how you respond. And that's not to say, that you need to have perfect reactions to imperfect situations or anything like that. But you can choose to respond in a way that takes responsibility for what you can do in the situation, even if that's, somebody comes at you in some super crook way and you're like, I am out, like I'm never coming back. Like that's you taking responsibility for your own happiness. That is you recognizing that if you're an adult, if you're not a child, and if you're not a child who is dependent on your parents, is dependent on your family for whatever else, you are the only person who can make you happy. So you're the only person who can choose. You're the only person who is responsible for your life. And like, I'm not to say that other people aren't responsible for their actions. I'm saying you're responsible if you're sitting there enduring it. Children are not. So most of us have micro trauma from our childhoods. It is what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, kids are inherently vulnerable. So they're inherently victims if there is things going around that are destructive around them because they can't leave. But after we are no longer children, many of us bring the idea of victimhood, and many of us bring the responses to victimhood and then continue to respond the same way when we're no longer victims. So if you can just flip the script, if you can like fundamentally flip the script and get deep down, feel a sense of radical self-responsibility, man, you're golden. You're golden. Like you can pave the way to whatever you want if you take that radical self-responsibility. Everyone has a good reason to be depressed. And I'm going to use the word depressed in its literal sense, not like a clinical diagnosis. I mean, everyone has a very good reason to be not excelling. Okay, so if you're trying to start a business, if you're trying to have this, phenomenal relationship, if you're trying to be a good parent, if you're trying to have a good career, if you're trying to have loving relationships, you will always be able to find very good reasons why you can't, why that is being depressed, why that is being repressed, why that is not flourishing for you or for anybody else. I don't know anybody that is in a terrible scenario in their life right now that doesn't have a very good reason to be that way. If you went into a jail and you talked to everybody about where they're coming from, I can guarantee you, pretty much everyone there is going to have a very good reason why they are absolutely, menaces to society. But that also means that no one does. Sorry. I mean, like, if everybody has a good reason to be depressed, if everybody has a good reason to be a D, if everybody has a good reason to be angry and to take it out on other people, that means nobody does. You are the only person who can decide. Okay, like every single day we look at people in the media who are public people who have done incredible things with their lives that come from absolute struggle and turmoil in their childhoods, that, go up against all odds, that go up against discrimination, that go up against unfair hurdles and challenges. They decided. It's you that decides. Those people, they decided that reason wasn't good enough. That just because mommy didn't love them and, daddy was terrible to them and they had all of these conflicts in their lives and they had all this trauma and they had all these dysfunctional relationships and society didn't want them to succeed and blah, 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 blah. They decided that those reasons were not good enough excuses for them not to go for what they want. Now you need to decide, just like I needed to decide, whether that reason, that is such a good reason for you not to try, for you to be depressed, for you to be stuck, you need to decide whether that reason is good enough for you to trade your life for it, for you to trade that happiness for it. And just to recap, I come from a background of severe discriminatory intergenerational trauma, from childhood trauma, from mental illness myself, as well as being raised in a family of mental illness, of absence of my parents, and substantial abuse. And I'm here, okay? Like I'm here, and I'm looking at people out there that have gone through like far worse things than I have even gone through, and ended up far better than I am right now. So I have every reason to feel depressed. I have every reason to feel like I'm stuck. I have every reason to have the struggles that I have been having this season. And again, I'm going to tell you the outcome to me taking this radical responsibility at the end. But the very first step to me getting unstuck was that breakthrough, that radical responsibility, that empowerment, that becoming ungaslightable. And now I've actually started making the courseware. So I initially wanted to explain step by step exactly how I was doing everything that I was doing in this season. And it became quite a big task. So I decided to make courseware to go along with every single episode. And the Unstuck episode, you get the Unstuck courseware for absolutely free. So you can get that wherever this is linked. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do this, how to take this radical responsibility, how to get unstuck. So the second step, and this is the third episode, how to get over anything, is finding your purpose. So I explained in that how we have two whole brains and there's two sides of realities. We essentially kind of have two whole personalities, and how life is really ironic in that, and that the purpose is actually found in the tension between that irony. So, and that's really how you achieve greatness is walking, or actually more like dancing on that tightrope between the two realms of reality. And walking that tightrope is that alignment that I'm talking about called root love. So it's life is equally spiritual and scientific. The spirit and science just kind of represent the two realms of reality, that you have two whole brains that I think were actually created in order to process these two sides to reality. So the divine in you, the spiritual side of you, has to be guided by boundaries. So the scientific, and your purpose lived, you living your purpose, is your potential made manifest. So the essential element of purpose is that you're grounding, that scientific, that earthly side of reality. You're grounding your divine traits. So you're taking that spirit, that's highest self, and you're creating a strategic plan to, act on it and make it something in this world. And the second step is really finding that purpose and finding that strategy, finding that those values and protecting them with boundaries so that you can continue on to step 3. And step 3 is all about inspiration. And this might seem a little bit backwards. I'm asking you to find your purpose before finding your inspiration, but I don't know if it is. I think that that inspiration is kind of a daily thing. Inspiration is something that you have to live with, and purpose is something that you can kind of meditate on. It's that breakthrough energy that I was talking about in the first step. So you can really kind of like figure out what your purpose is. And then you need inspiration to kind of like daily push you through it. And again, like I said, I'm creating courseware on this. So like we're diving way deeper into this, into the hows, into the whys, into the what you need to do to achieve this. But I think that finding your purpose is first and inspiration is after that. So step 3 is tapping into your inspiration. So when you take that radical self-responsibility, it begins to become radical self-trust. And radical self-trust is synonymous in my understanding with faith. So inspiration is kind of like the realm of spirit, right? It's your divinity. It's that, right-brained realm of reality. And again, your purpose is grounding that, right? In that left brain way. You're bringing it to reality. You're acting on it. You're creating something from it, whether it's, a vocation, like a career, or which includes, staying at home with your kids to be a caretaker, etc. Or, maybe it's something completely different than that doesn't have to do with what we typically talk about when we talk about purpose. But inspiration comes, the inspiration to drive you towards your purpose comes from a deep awareness of being safe, in a way that taps you into your magic, that taps you into the magic. So inspiration is a natural way to be. If you've seen children, oh my Lord, my little one has just started walking. And I tell you, sometimes like he is just so stoked about everything. Inspiration is a natural way of being. You don't have to create inspiration. Inspiration just is. We have to open up to be able to feel it. Kids are inherently just so open. And the way that we open up is that we feel safe on a spiritual and emotional level. So believing that the world is a good place, that people are good, that you belong, that you have something of value to give. Everything is constantly getting better. These beliefs, this recognition of the truth. And we'll talk about what happens when you don't recognize that as the truth, because that's a very real lived reality that people are living through. But when you stop believing in that magic, when you stop believing in potential, when you stop seeing the reality that you have total agency, that the world is good, that the world is unfolding towards, perfection, towards betterment constantly, it's really hard to feel inspired. And it's really difficult to feel any sense of wanting to grab hold of progress and make, a change if you can only believe in what you've already seen. Divinity, faith, being in touch with divinity really opens up your potential infinitely. And that's really where inspiration flows from. Step 4, we talked about in episode 5. This was building healthy habits. So now we're getting into that realm of groundedness, right? We're talking about purpose and inspiration, and purpose and inspiration, they really are divine traits. They really are emotional and spiritual, and emotional and spiritual realms. But living with them requires a kind of groundedness. And that's really easy to achieve when we're talking about habits. So I talked about in this episode how everything is habitual. So from neurons to nerves, like our nervous system, our brains firing, like we run on programming and automatic responses. So everything already is habitual. Pretty much almost everything is habitual. Even when something brand new happens in your life, your response to it is, I can almost guarantee you, habitual. Getting back to that, radical self-responsibility, the only way that we can make a change is if we get into that driver's seat, right? So breaking habits is absolutely crucial if you desire any difference in your life. So in your relationships and your finance and your feelings and your thoughts and your behaviors, if you desire change, you absolutely need to break habits, and you need to form new habits. And I talked about in this episode too, how most of the people that I meet that are committed to personal growth and change are either focused on breaking bad habits, or creating good habits. And those are two sides of the same coin. You can't do one without the other, or it doesn't stick. It doesn't do anything. And talked about how changing habits without healing is just coping. And healing without habit breaking is just spiritual bypassing. And if you want to hear more about that, I definitely dive into that episode. Or again, like I'm building out right now full courseware for each of these episodes. But habits are the only way that you can plan on anything. So there is a saying that a failure to plan is a plan to fail. I don't know if I agree with that, like literally 100%, but I definitely agree that a failure to plan is a plan to have the same things happen, or possibly worse. I mean, they might get better, but it's sort of like leaving it up to fate. And I don't know, that's not really good enough for me. I don't know if that's good enough for you. I want to know where I'm going, and I want to have a hand in how things turn out for me. And habits are the only way, they're the only way that you can actually plan for change. Because when we're changing our trajectories, I was talking about this when I started talking about the steps, right? The reason that we have steps, the reason that we have a strategy is because change is incremental. We're kind of changing our trajectories inch by inch, right? And over the course of time, that makes a dramatic difference in where we end up. So different kinds of habits are required for different ends, right? I don't love the idea of coping, I don't love the idea of coping. I would prefer that we would be practicing, that we would have a practice, that we would be building habits, and we would be building routines. And I go into exactly like the definitions of bypassing and coping versus like a practice, a habit, or a routine in the episode. And I will dive into exactly how to create those in the courses. But I kind of think on reflecting on that we sort of need them all. My little one now hurts himself a lot more because he's on the go. And when he hurts himself, holy moly, do I ever get shot into like fight or flight. Like I panic. He smacked his head on our marble table really badly, and he cut himself open bad enough that he needed to go to the hospital and get like a little like glue stitch or whatever, like a little sticky stitch, like not actual stitches through his face, but they needed to get stuck together because it was open, and it was, yeah. Anyways, I panic. I panic worse than I have ever panicked in my entire life internally. Like I feel the level of like panic energy is just like, it's so high, and I have to force myself to regulate. Like I have to force regulate in like a split second, instantaneous, go from like panic, like I'm going to lose my absolute mind feeling, to being like, it's going to be okay. And actually feeling that way, like keeping my stuff together to be like, does he need to go to the hospital? Can you see the cut? Because I'm holding him. Like, does he, okay, well then we need to get his bag ready, and like holding him and like making him feel like it's going to be okay. And because I'm going to take care of this for you. When my initial reaction is like, I don't know, run outside screaming and yelling and flailing my arms because I'm so freaked out at my baby hurting himself. So that's definitely like a coping thing. I don't think that's like, a habit or routine. Maybe it is. I'm not sure. But I think that those sorts of situations, definitely having, a way to cope is definitely healthy. And again, I talked about how to tell the difference between coping and practicing and bypassing and having a habit and building a routine in episode 5. And I think I will go back over that to see if whether me having to force regulate when my child hurts himself is coping or not. So there's absolutely a place for coping strategies that's in an emergency. Just like there's also a place for bypassing, say you're in a social setting where, someone is being some kind of way and it's making you feel some kind of way. And if you can kind of call upon sort of healing principles and spiritual principles to just sort of align yourself in that moment to be able to like be in peace and be yourself and not, feel threatened, etc., then that's a really wonderful tool to have in your belt. But these are both for situations that are unusual. When we're dealing with our day-to-day life in ways that come from, or habits or practices that come from a place of coping or bypassing, it really is counterproductive. And I go into how to tell the difference between coping, bypassing, creating a practice, a habit, and routine in episode 5. And I'm going to be discussing exactly how to develop these things, or how to turn a coping mechanism into a healthy habit, or how to turn a bypassing tactic into a practice, into a healing practice in the courseware. And you may be thinking right now, like, hey, Laura Lee, you literally just said that, doing habits, etc., doing the happiness habits are not actually causal, and that people who are struggling and not doing them natively actually, quote unquote, can't do them. And what I meant is that they can't do them in the same ways that someone who does them natively does. So you can force yourself to work out. You're not going to get the same benefits as somebody who is doing it from a place of peace, from a place of alignment, from a place of loving themselves, if you're coming from a place of you have to force through it and it's punishing, etc. And the difference between, a happiness habit being, punishing or taking away, and one that is actually beneficial and is, bringing to your life and providing for you, is what I was talking about. It's the micro trauma, right? So the next 4 steps are really where we dive into the different layers that you could be, suffering from this microtrauma. The first layer is mindset. So in the 6th episode, I talk about assessing your reality IQ. And although when we're talking about mindset, the IQ associated with mindset is called an analytical IQ. It's more synonymous with the traditional intelligence quotient. But for the purposes of the podcast and of this episode, I really talked about reality IQ, which is actually a conglomerate of all of the different IQs. So if you are listening to the last 4 episodes, episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9, you'll know that I talked about the sets. So starting with mindset, we moved on to HeartSet, SoulSet, and BodySet. And I explained that each layer, each of these levels, each of these what I call districts when I'm teaching, have their own specific way of knowing, their own specific IQ. So when we're talking about mindset, it's analytic IQ. When we're talking about HeartSet, we're talking about emotional IQ. When we're talking about SoulSet, we're talking about intuitive IQ. And when we're talking about BodySet, or your environment, we're talking about somatic IQ. Now, all of the IQs together make up reality IQ. The reason that we talk about reality IQ when we're talking about mindset is because the mindset is the control room and it's the watcher. So it can watch all of the other sets and assess whether there is micro trauma, whether there is healing that needs to be done, whether there is growth that needs to be done, and what needs to be strengthened. So when we're talking about micro trauma, we're talking about what I call dents, divots, and deficits. So a reality IQ dent is like a temporary marring of how you see things, how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you view reality. Now, a dent left alone will just pop back out naturally. It happens all the time. You'll be like a little bit put out for a little while. It hurts. It doesn't feel right, but it'll heal itself in time. A divot is a little bit more serious. But it will also fill in eventually. The way that you saw yourself, the way that you saw the world, the way that you viewed reality will return. Reality IQ deficit is when you start to forget your clear view. So when a dent happens, essentially you still remember how you saw things before. So somebody tells you that, you're not seeing things clearly, you're not feeling things clearly, you're not intuiting things clearly, you don't understand things clearly, and they do, and it's something that doesn't feel good to you, the reality they're trying to impose upon you, and that's a dent. So when it gets to the stage of deficit is when you start to forget what you saw before, because initially if somebody is telling you that your point of view is wrong in a way that's harmful, in a way that's not beneficial, in a way that is coming from a reality IQ deficiency, we'll talk about briefly right after this, you'll fight back. Like your internal knowing, your internal view of the world will say to you, that's not real, that's not true. And given time, the way that you see things will just clarify once again. But when you start to forget your clear view and you lose connection to yourself, to the way that you feel, to the way that you saw things, to the way that yourself and your experience, and like how, you're supposed to live in this world and how you're supposed to express yourself, that's when you start to experience a deficit. And that's what I call micro trauma. So if you experience enough dents, and especially divots, you'll start to actually take on the role of keeping it dented. And I'm going to go into this at length in the courseware, but this is self-sabotage, okay? So that becomes a micro trauma. You're living in a deficit, forgetting what your clear view is, how you actually feel and see things. A reality IQ deficit is when you no longer have access to your authentic perspective. So I talked about how when I look at mental illness, the traits associated with mental illness, especially cluster B personality disorders, totally align with a reality IQ deficiency. Also, many times somebody who's suffering with a reality IQ deficiency, which is nobody listening to this podcast, but if you're suffering from microtraumas, it very well could have come from somebody with a reality IQ deficiency. They're often fixated on proving that their view is correct, which is where the dents and divots come from. Okay, so reality IQ 0, so base reality IQ, is like being able to be objective. It's the ability to see that other people have achieved what you want to achieve, and it's the feeling that if they can do it, I can do it too. That I can do anything given enough time and resources. And then a high reality IQ is the feeling and the thinking and the kind of knowing, the deep knowing that everything is actually conspiring in your favor always, and that you're meant for your dream life. And that high reality IQ is really what aligns you to being able to create whatever you want, to being able to live that charmed life where everything just sort of falls into place. And I'm going to just talk a little bit more about what this is, because like I was saying, I didn't get into analytic IQ specifically. I will in the courseware, but reality IQ actually subsists of all of the different IQs. So I'm just going to break down what the next 3 are, just to give you an idea for how this state comes to be, how this high reality, where you can live that charmed life and everything just seems to work out for you, actually consists of. So step or stage number 6 is the HeartSet. So you're elevating your emotional IQ. I talked about in this episode, in episode 7, how mental health is more about emotional and spiritual wellness than it is about mental or mind. When we talk about feeling good, when we talk about being happy, it really isn't a mind thing at all. It really is in the heart. But not only that, everything that you actually could desire really does come from self-care. Like the acts that you need in order to create anything really does boil down to self-care. And self-care is in the realm of the HeartSet. So if you want, the relationship that you want, the wealth that you want, the beauty, the body, the house, whatever, like if you imagine those things, if you imagine the one thing that you really want to create right now, you really want that like loving relationship, you really want, a banging bank account, or, to be like a phenomenal parent, or have, lots of respect in your community, etc. Imagine like trying to achieve that thing with like no self-care versus intent care for yourself. Every single thing that you could possibly imagine wanting absolutely necessitates self-care in the day-to-day functioning, the day-to-day steps of achieving it. Like, what outcomes do you think come from a lack of self-care? What outcomes do you think come from intense self-care? Emotional well-being is actually, I'm going to say it's more important than mental. Maybe that's just because of the stage that our society in, that a lot of us have a lot more mental well-being than emotional, because the emotional wellness is largely overlooked. But mindset is so important for us to create emotional wellness. That's why we start there, because it has the ability to change course and it has the ability to navigate, whereas the emotions don't. So when we are trained to use our minds to watch the emotions, to watch for the dents and deficits in our emotional IQ, that's where real healing and real progress can take place towards our happiness, which includes, us being able to take day-to-day steps towards our biggest goals. So emotional IQ dents and divots are when your true feelings are rejected or manipulated. You can imagine all the scenarios where this happens. So when you're living in an emotional IQ deficit, it's when your feelings have been rejected or manipulated, or, you've been shamed for them. You have been made to feel bad for the way that you feel, like it's wrong. Like, you start to actually do it yourself. So you start to oftentimes using the mindset and the self-talk tool, what I call the self-talk tool, you start to manipulate yourself and even gaslight yourself. You start to deny the true feelings and start to become judgmental. Now, an emotional IQ deficiency is a lack of empathy, emotions gone, like they're wildly inappropriate, oftentimes, abusive. And again, the emotional IQ deficiency, the traits of emotional IQ deficiency, completely correlate with many types of mental illness. So a base emotional IQ, so EIQ 0, is when you can feel your own feelings clearly and you empathize with others easily because you empathize with yourself. Being able to feel your own feelings is absolutely necessary to feel other people's feelings, to empathize. And this is a really empowered state. I mentioned how it's actually kind of revolutionary right now. All these TikTokers are talking about how their therapists have gotten them to just like get into their feelings and just feeling their feelings. And that has, proven to be just this massive, pivotal exercise for change for them. Because this is a truly empowered state, just to be able to feel yourself, just to be able to know how you feel and to, be there for other people as well. So a high emotional IQ is actually the ability to tap into and create the richest emotional experiences, like belonging, being loving, like loving other people, loving things, causes, experiences. But it's also being loved, the ability to create that rich emotional experience of being loved. This impacts both mental and energetic realms acutely, and vice versa. All of the sets inherently work together. The emotions and the energetic center are like especially linked. They work very closely together, which brings us to the 7th step, right? And this is the episode 8 that I was talking about, SoulSet. So we're talking about energizing your intuitive IQ. So I talked about how the subconscious is intuition, and the subconscious is actually an intermediary between the unconscious and the conscious. So it's a powerful force to be able to tap into, to listen to, but also energy is like literally the force of creation. It creates matter. So it is behind everything that you want to do, or everything you want to experience, everything you want to have. Energy is behind it. So the unconscious mind is typically 90 to 95% of the picture. When we are looking at our lives, our experiences, how we act, how we react, 90 to 95% of that is created from our unconscious. Being able to tap into that via the intuition, being able to understand what's happening in your unconscious, but also to send kind of messages and instructions the other way down from your unconscious through your subconscious into your unconscious, and really get yourself aligned with what you want. I mean, you're just tapping into like so much power. So intuitive IQ, dents and divots, they divert energy from being productive to being destructive. The natural role of energy is to be productive, but if we divert energy to the wrong things, I mean, geez, isn't an atom bomb just releasing the energy from an atom? I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it is. So, you divert energy in the wrong way and it becomes like incredibly destructive. It is completely amoral, right? Energy is amoral. It is not good or bad. It just is. You can put it towards productivity or you can put it towards destruction, and, it works just as well either way. So, you will inherently be aligned with productivity, right? We all want to be happy. We all want everybody else to be happy too. Nobody wants anybody else to be unhappy. Nobody else wants to be destructive. It's all just when that happens, when other people, or when we are destructive in our own lives, when we sabotage ourselves, and when other people are destructive in our lives, it always comes from a twisting. It's never straightforward. It's never that somebody wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm going to have a really bad day, or I'm going to make somebody else have a bad day. It really is just a twisting. So, the dents and divots are diverted energy. Now, when we get into an intuitive IQ deficit, this is almost like going around in circles, because it's like we're actively misdirecting the energy. And this is really, we really get into the realm of sort of inexplicable self-sabotage, where you seem to be like manifesting the bad stuff, like you have really bad luck, that kind of thing. This is most likely, we're talking about an intuitive IQ deficit. So an intuitive IQ base IIQ, intuitive IQ 0, is when your mind, heart, and body are actually guided in productive ways by your intuition. So your life progresses really beautifully because you sort of follow this, almost divine knowing of, that inspiration and your purpose, but also blended with your unconscious, right? With your instincts, with this inherited knowing, imagine, okay, our conscious minds are like 5, max 10%. So imagine how much more power is lying in the unconscious if 90% is lying there unconscious. Like, we have so much knowledge. We have access to so much information. We have access to so much power that even just a base intuitive IIQ 0 means that, like, being in touch with that basic alignment means our life will progress absolutely beautifully. Having a high intuitive IQ means that you can create whatever you want. This is when you become a conscious creator. This is what the manifestation principles, they're trying to teach this. They're trying to teach a high intuitive IQ. Now, Rootlev, the principle and practice of Rootlev that I teach is very, very aligned with this. I think it's probably because this is my strongest set, that the way that I teach Rootlev really, really strongly aligns with this high intuitive IQ, although it completely aligns with, high somatic IQ as well. It creates, incredible bodies, incredible, wealth, incredible relationships, as well as, just incredible freedom and confidence and comfort to be able to, like, do whatever you want. So alignment really is kind of founded in the energy. I mean, maybe I just think that because like I said, energy is my strongest set. But I feel like inspiration and energy are kind of the foundation to alignment. So the last step is aligning our body set. So that is the body, the bank account, the house, the spouse, everything that you want to live, experience really is body set. That's why we typically tend to focus so much on this realm. We're trying to, like, get those things, because we're not realizing that those things are actually made of other things. So when your thoughts become actions, that's body set. When your emotions become hormones, that's body set. When intuition becomes your nervous system response, that's body set. So we're always, kind of focusing on these actions and, trying to, create happy hormones or get hormonal balance or, have these nervous system responses, regulate our nervous system, etc. These are all, like, physical things that we're trying to do, as much as, making more money or buying the house or the car or the spouse or, getting the spouse or whatever else that we could possibly want. And they're just as linked to other things. They're just as founded in other things as any of these very physical things also are. So, your actions, they're rooted in thoughts. Your hormones, they come down to emotions. Your nervous system responses, this is energy. And we really need to get into these layers in order to make the physical changes that we want to make, but also we can watch the physical and understand what kinds of, mental, emotional, and spiritual changes we need to make by seeing, the manifestation, the comeuppance, our mind, heart, and spirit made physical by looking at our lives. So BodySet is its own thing. I mean, you can use discipline on it. You can get up and do stuff. You can, you can brush your hair. You can go work out. You can do things. You can clean your house. But it's also a product of the sets and the IQs. So we work on both layers when I'm teaching about this. You can work on both sides, right? From, I call it like a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. So you remember the habits without the healing? Like, anybody who's tried to sort of diet and exercise to lose weight and that hasn't? I mean, it's actually proven with data that successful people have emotional and spiritual changes, and only about 5% succeed. So that means 95% of people fail. And that's because the 95% are trying over and over and over again to change their habits without doing the healing. The only real way to kind of make these physical changes is not just by focusing on the physical. You really do need to focus on the emotional and spiritual, as well as the mental changes to get those physical alterations. So you can actually use BodySet as a therapy to change though, and it must kind of be incorporated to some extent. And I teach that in the course. That's the bottom up approach. I do it a little bit differently than, the standard, but the somatic IQ dents and divots are your actions being impacted by disruptive influences. So somatic IQ deficit, it results in kind of wishful thinking, excuses, blame, and comparison. So at that stage, you're sort of making your destructive influence on yourself. It's not your fault, just your responsibility. Just saying. So somatic IQ deficiency is denial and living in what I call the ego tool. I do not have time to explain the ego tool, but I will be explaining the ego tool in the courses. So somatic IQ, base somatic IQ 0 is being in touch with the body, having body love, you feeling your feelings, etc., but in the body, right? You really feeling your alignment to things in your physical form, your misalignment with things in your physical form, like getting the heebie-jeebies and knowing that you need to, divert and go somewhere else, or feeling really just like, illuminated and vibrant by an experience and knowing that you're in the right space. You're able to reflect fully on experiences. Okay. So you're able to see, where you went wrong, where you went right, what you really, really like, and how you need to change. Your ability to learn from others and be guided by others' successes, and you're protected by their failures, right? You're really able to kind of grab other people's experiences with both hands and grab life with both hands. So high somatic IQ is such a high trust in yourself and your purpose and what you're capable of, that your view of reality is like beyond what others have ever experienced, or beyond what others know, see, or experience. So if SIQ 0, base somatic IQ, is you being able to be guided by others' successes and protected by their failures, high somatic IQ is you having such a high trust in yourself that you can blaze a brand new trail for yourself that nobody else has ever even walked down before. So you're being both divinely and physically guided towards what's right. This is like all of the high IQs, the high reality IQ. It's just such a powerful place to be. And you can understand how powerful this is when you put all of these high IQs together. You have a high analytic IQ, a high emotional IQ, a high intuitive IQ, and a high somatic IQ. You're walking on sunshine. You literally, you can't even be, taken down. You live such a charmed existence that even mistakes end up being perfect. The other day, I was carving a pumpkin in the shape of my child's face, because he has this really smiley kind of cool face that lent itself well to a jack-o'-lantern. And I actually made a mistake. I didn't draw it properly, and I made a mistake where I made his mouth a little crooked. But then my husband looked at it, and he actually smiles crookedly, a lot of the times. There's just this little way that he smiles when he's being he's in a certain mood, that I had actually captured perfectly. So this is a very small example, but even your mistakes at this level, when you're living in this high sort of somatic IQ, and especially in high reality IQ, it just, your life just unfolds so aligned. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. So my outcome, I promised that I would explain what my outcome is after going through these steps. And it's been about 6 months, actually, since I've been recording this whole season. It's been a huge journey for me, going from such a place of struggle, of intense struggle, of more acute struggle than I even thought I was, capable of experiencing, to, well, where am I now? Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest with y'all, because I think that you deserve that. And I think that we need more of that in the teaching space, especially online in these days. I'm still in the ring. Absolutely. So I still have bad days, but I have a lot more good days than I did bad. And the bad days are never as bad as they used to be. Although sometimes I feel like the outcomes from the bad days could be more severe. I think that is in direct relation to how much we're growing and how much we're progressing, that things are just changing. So I really want to explain this because I think that at this stage in the game, when we are making these changes for ourselves, it really does come down to incremental changes. But over time, it's like a plane taking off, right? If we're kind of like a quarter way through our life and we're changing our trajectory, it makes really small changes at a moment, and we need to keep nudging that trajectory towards what we want to create. But over time, when we continue to change the trajectory, especially, but even if we just change the trajectory a little bit and then stay on that path over time, we can end up in a dramatically different place than we were before. And I am definitely well on my way towards that. I have not ever fallen back anywhere near where I unstuck myself from. And I had been sitting in that stuck place for a number of years. We are making moves to create, our ultimate kind of best reality that we've always dreamed of, that we have not been able to really kind of grab hold of, with that circular kind of self-sabotaging energy of living with micro traumas that just end up with us being in a reality acute deficit. We have really kind of cracked through that and are making pretty massive leaps towards our biggest goals. And the real beauty of what I teach, Root Love specifically, is that it's this kind of alignment where it doesn't just align you with your good life so that you're on the path to it. It actually feels phenomenal in the moment too. So this can be a real freedom instantaneously. It really puts you in this flow state that feels absolutely phenomenal. So it's kind of like getting all of your dreams right now, as well as putting you on the path to kind of physically reveling in the future. So psychologists call it flow. Eastern spiritualists call it enlightenment. But Root Love is really both. What it is sort of linking the two sides of the brain to parts of reality, which I think probably is what flow and enlightenment are. Maybe it's describing the two sides of the same thing, but it's kind of equally letting things in and putting things out. It's giving and receiving. It's listening and expressing. It's being guided and having influence. It's effort. It's ease. It's being pushed. It's having peace. So I remember when I talked about having greatness is like living between the tensions of this irony in life. Well, this really is it. And I make tools to do this. So Root Love is a state like enlightenment, but it's also a practice like flow. And I explain how to do it, but I also give people tools so that they can experience it and be guided to create that right away, as well as heal and grow and strengthen in the personal powers that create this easeful life. It really is the secret to creating a sustainable dream. And I am opening up the Sustainable Dreams Inc. membership which will allow you to get access to all of these tools. It's been closed for a number of years because I couldn't keep up with everybody that was in it. But I am reopening it now because I definitely have the resources to keep up with y'all. So I'm sorry if this was really quick. I was trying to cram in so much into such a little amount of time, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you in the membership. And I hope you enjoyed this season. It's been really great for me to spend this time with y'all and to, unpack my sustainable dream on the interdependent, stage of my life. It's been really nice chatting on Casual Friday, and I'll see you next season. G'day, y'all.